4 years ago, my brother's betrayal shattered my world, stealing my wife and leaving me to wander the ruins of a life I thought was mine forever. But it was our dying father's hidden secret, a truth so explosive it would demolish their gilded empire, that delivered the justice I never dared to dream of. When my father's voice crackled through the phone, sharp and stripped of its usual warmth, a chill ran through me. "Family meeting tomorrow in Maplewood," he said, his tone heavy with purpose, devoid of the pleasantries I'd come to expect. "James will be there." My heart sank, my grip tightening on the phone, a knot twisting in my stomach. 4 years, 4 long, agonizing years, had passed since I last faced my brother, James, the man who took Emily, the woman I loved with every fiber of my being. Their betrayal had carved a wound that never fully healed, though I'd buried myself in work, rebuilt my life in Portland, and convinced myself I'd moved on. Yet my father's words rekindled the embers of that pain, proving the scar was still raw beneath the surface. This wasn't an invitation. It was a summons, a command I couldn't ignore. My fingers hovered over the phone, my mind screaming to make an excuse, to avoid the confrontation I'd dreaded for years. But deep down, I knew running wasn't an option. My father didn't call for trivial matters. This was serious. With a heavy sigh, I forced out a reluctant, "All right, I'll be there." The next evening, as I pulled into the driveway of my father's house in Maplewood, memories flooded back like a relentless tide. The gravel path where James and I once parked side by side, laughing over silly, carefree moments. The porch where I'd held Emily close, her warmth against me as we dreamed of a future filled with love and promise. The front door I'd slammed shut 4 years ago, vowing never to return, my heart shattered. Now, I stepped inside, my pulse racing, my heart pounding harder than I wanted to admit. The air carried the familiar scent of my father's pipe tobacco, laced with the faint echo of my mother's rosewater perfume, a lingering reminder of her presence, though she'd been gone for years. Some things never changed, frozen in time like ghosts. But others had shifted irrevocably, and as I walked into the living room, there they were, James and Emily, sitting side by side, acting as if they hadn't torn my world apart. James lounged in his chair, one arm draped casually over the side, his signature arrogance practically radiating. His tailored shirt was crisp, his hair styled to perfection, his watch gleaming with ostentatious wealth, a symbol of the excess he'd always chased. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our father's eyes, the eldest son destined to carry the family name. Emily's gaze met mine, sharp and amused, like a predator toying with prey she'd already ensnared. She smiled, not with warmth but with smug confidence, her eyes scanning me up and down. "Still flying solo, David?" James sneered, tilting his head with a mocking grin. Emily's laugh followed, soft but cruel, cutting through the air like a blade. "Same old David, huh?" she said, her voice dripping with condescension, as if I were a relic of a past she'd long outgrown. My fingers twitched, a sharp urge to wipe that smirk off James's face surging through me. A small, primal part of me wanted to lunge across the room to make him feel a fraction of the pain he'd caused. But I forced myself to stay still, to breathe. I'd spent years preparing for this moment, telling myself their taunts couldn't hurt me anymore, that I'd grown beyond their petty jabs. But standing there, their arrogance stung like a fresh wound, reopening scars I thought I'd buried. Before I could respond, my father stood, his presence silencing the room instantly. He didn't need to shout. His quiet authority commanded attention, his posture radiating a strength that demanded respect. "Enough," he said, his gaze shifting between James and me. "I have something important to share." The air grew heavy, thick with unspoken tension. My father's voice was steady, but there was a weight to it, a finality that made my stomach churn. James's smirk faltered for the first time, and Emily sat up straighter, her fingers gripping the armrest tightly, her nails digging into the fabric. My father walked to his desk and placed a thick envelope on the table with deliberate care, his movements slow and purposeful. "This is my will," he said. The room seemed to hold its breath, the words hanging in the air like a storm cloud. James's confidence dissolved, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty that betrayed his unease. Emily's composure cracked, her eyes narrowing slightly as she leaned forward, her lips parting slightly. "Dad," James said, his voice stripped of its usual swagger, slow and cautious. "Why are we talking about this now?" My father's eyes didn't waver, his gaze piercing. "Because I don't have time to waste." The words landed like a thunderclap, heavy and final, echoing in the silence. "I have terminal cancer. 3 months left." Silence swallowed the room, thick and suffocating. James's mouth parted slightly, but no words came, his eyes wide with shock. Emily's smug expression vanished, replaced by something unreadable. Shock, perhaps, but not grief, not sorrow. My heart sank, the reality of my father's words crashing over me like a wave, stealing the air from my lungs. 3 months. The man who'd been my rock, the strongest person I knew, the one who'd stood firm through every storm, was slipping away. I glanced at James, expecting some sign of sorrow, but his eyes were calculating, already scheming, his jaw tight. Emily's gaze darted to the envelope, her concern not for my father, but for what this meant for their carefully curated future, their empire of wealth and status. My father continued, his voice calm but unyielding, cutting through the tension. "There's more." He pulled out another document, his fingers tapping it lightly, his expression unreadable. "This is proof of what you did 4 years ago." My stomach churned, a sick feeling crawling up my spine as he turned his laptop toward us. A grainy video played, a timestamp, a location, and there they were, James and Emily, laughing in a luxurious hotel in Seattle, sipping cocktails, their faces lit with careless joy, while our mother lay dying in a hospital bed, struggling for every breath. Bank statements followed, cold and undeniable, showing thousands of dollars, $5,000 a month meant for her medical care, funneled into their lavish spending. Shopping sprees in designer boutiques, 5-star dinners in exclusive restaurants, extravagant vacations to places like Aspen and Miami. James's face paled, his jaw tightening, a slow flush creeping up his neck. Emily gripped his arm, her voice sharp and defensive. "This is ridiculous," she sputtered, her composure fraying, her words too high, too frantic. But my father's gaze was unrelenting, cold as steel, his eyes boring into them. "You stole from me," he said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. "You let your mother die alone." The words landed like a gunshot, slicing through the suffocating silence, each syllable heavy with betrayal. I turned to James, waiting for an excuse, a deflection, anything. But he had none. For the first time in his life, he was speechless, his golden child charm useless, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "Was it worth it?" I asked, my voice low but steady, trembling with years of suppressed pain, the weight of their betrayal pouring out. "The money, the luxury, the life you built while she suffered, while she fought for every breath. Was it worth it?" James glared, his eyes burning with resentment, but Emily avoided my gaze, her confidence shattered, her usual smirk gone. My father leaned forward, his words slow and deliberate, each one a hammer striking their fragile facade. "You don't deserve a thing." He slid the will toward me, his eyes steady, his voice unwavering. "Everything I have goes to David." The room froze, time itself seeming to halt. James shot to his feet, his chair scraping the floor with a screech, nearly toppling over. "What?" he shouted, his voice cracking with panic, his face flushed with disbelief, his hands trembling. Emily's nails dug into his arm, her own composure crumbling, her eyes wide with desperation. "You can't do this!" she hissed, her voice sharp, her carefully maintained mask of control shattering. My father raised an eyebrow, unshaken, his presence a quiet storm. "Can't I?" He turned to James, his tone final, unyielding. "You made your choices. Now live with them." He slid another document forward, his fingers steady, his gaze piercing. "These records show your theft. Fight me, and they go to the authorities. You'll lose more than money. You'll lose your freedom." James's shoulders sagged, the fight draining from him like air from a punctured balloon, his face draining of color. Emily's voice rose, shrill and frantic, her hands slamming against the table. "We'll sue! We'll get a lawyer!" James snapped at her, his voice hollow, defeated, barely audible. "Just stop." Without another word, he stood and walked out, his movements slow, heavy, as if the weight of his actions had finally caught up, aging him 10 years in moments. Emily scrambled after him, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor, her face a mask of panic, her eyes darting back as if searching for a lifeline. The door slammed shut behind them, the sound echoing through the house like a final nail in their coffin. For the first time in 4 years, I felt the weight of their betrayal lift, a quiet satisfaction settling in its place, warm and steady. In the weeks that followed, their world collapsed like a house of cards caught in a storm. Without my father's financial backing, James's empire of excess crumbled. His sprawling mansion in Bellevue was seized by the bank, its opulent halls emptied faster than he could fight back. His luxury cars, symbols of his so-called success, were repossessed, their gleaming surfaces now just memories. His social status, once untouchable, was reduced to whispers and ridicule in the elite circles that had worshipped him, their champagne toasts replaced by gossip about his fall. Emily vanished, leaving him as easily as she'd left me, her loyalty tied to wealth that no longer existed. She chased a new savior, someone else to fund her lavish lifestyle, leaving James alone in the wreckage. He sent desperate messages, calls I ignored, texts I deleted without reading. "We need to talk," he wrote, offering no apology, no remorse, just empty pleas that meant nothing. I didn't respond. He'd made his bed, now he lay in it, alone with the consequences of his choices. My father's final months were quiet, filled with moments I'd cherish forever. We sat together in his study, the room warm with the glow of a single lamp, reminiscing about simpler times, family dinners filled with my mother's laughter, summer evenings in the backyard chasing fireflies. He spoke little of James after the will was finalized, his decision firm, his regrets few. His focus was on me, ensuring I was ready to carry on his legacy, to build a life of my own, free from the shadows of betrayal. We talked about the past, about the man he'd been, the sacrifices he'd made to build a life for us. And then, just like that, he was gone, his strength fading like a candle burning out. The day of his funeral arrived under a gray, overcast sky in Oak Ridge, as if the world itself mourned his loss. The service was small, family, a few old friends, business associates who respected my father's quiet strength, his unyielding integrity. I stood by his grave, hands clenched at my sides, the priest's voice a dull hum against the weight of my grief. Then I saw him, James, standing a few yards away, a ghost of the man he once was. His tailored suits were gone, replaced by worn, modest clothes. His perfectly styled hair was unkempt, his frame gaunt, his posture stripped of the arrogance that had defined him. He looked broken, alone, a shadow of the golden child he'd been. I ignored him, focusing on my father's casket as it was lowered into the ground, the finality of it sinking into my bones. My anchor, my quiet source of strength, was gone, and I had to face the world without him. As the crowd thinned, offering condolences before departing, James approached, his voice raw, barely above a whisper. "I didn't think he'd really cut me off," he said, almost to himself, his eyes distant. "I thought he was bluffing." I met his gaze, unflinching, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside. "You never thought about anyone but yourself," I said, each word deliberate, heavy with years of pain. "You lost everything because of your own choices. Hard is rebuilding a life from nothing while you lived in luxury, spending money meant for mom's care. Hard is burying the only parent who still cared about me while you stood too cowardly to even say goodbye." He flinched, his shoulders sagging, his eyes glistening with something that might have been regret, a flicker of the brother I'd once known. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking, raw with defeat, his hands trembling at his sides. I stared at him for a long moment, searching for some flicker of emotion, anger, sadness, pity. But there was nothing, only a calm resolve, a certainty that I'd moved beyond him. "Goodbye, James," I said, my voice firm, final. I walked away, leaving him behind for good, my steps steady, my heart lighter. I didn't look back, and for the first time in 4 years, I felt a sense of freedom, as if the chains of their betrayal had finally broken, leaving me unburdened. The weeks after the funeral were quieter than I expected, a stark contrast to the chaos of the past. No more tense calls, no more looming presence of James trying to claw his way back into my life. It was just me now, and for the first time in years, I wasn't living in someone else's shadow. I spent my days in my father's house, my house now, in Oak Ridge, sorting through memories that clung to every corner like dust. The living room where we'd shared laughter over family games. My mother's reading chair by the fireplace, its cushions still holding the shape of her presence. My father's study where I'd watched him work late into the night, his presence a steady comfort. At first, it was hard to be there alone, surrounded by echoes of a family that no longer existed, the weight of loss heavy in every room. But little by little I made it mine, redecorating, clearing out old furniture, keeping only what held meaning. I replaced the heavy drapes with lighter ones, letting sunlight flood the rooms, chasing away the shadows of the past, transforming the house into a place of renewal. One afternoon, as I sorted through my father's belongings, I found an old photo album buried in a desk drawer, its leather cover worn from years of neglect. Hesitant, I opened it, unsure if I was ready to face the memories inside. But as I flipped through the pages, a smile crept across my face, warm and unexpected. There we were, my father, my mother, and me, captured in moments from a time before the betrayals, before the bitterness that had torn us apart. A picnic in the park, my mother's warm smile lighting up the frame, my father's proud grin as he held me on his shoulders, a boy full of dreams. It reminded me that my life hadn't always been defined by loss, that there had been joy, love, a family worth remembering. That realization was freeing, like a weight lifting from my chest, a breath I hadn't known I was holding. For so long, anger and pain had shaped me, but I didn't have to let them anymore. With the estate settled, I began to dream of what came next, allowing myself to imagine a future unburdened by the past. For years, I'd been trapped, haunted by what James and Emily had taken from me, my love, my trust, my sense of home. But now, I was in control, the architect of my own destiny. I expanded my business, pouring my energy into projects that lit a spark in me, traveled to places I'd always wanted to see, coastal towns with salty air, bustling cities alive with possibility, embraced the life I'd put on hold while drowning in the wreckage of their betrayal. The resources my father left me gave me the means, but it was the clarity, the peace, that gave me the courage to move forward, to build something new. One evening, standing on the porch of my home in Oak Ridge, I watched the sunset paint the sky in soft hues of amber and rose, the air carrying the scent of freshly cut grass, a gentle breeze brushing against my skin. The storm of betrayal, loss, and reckoning had passed, and I'd emerged stronger, free from the ghosts that had haunted me for so long. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving, building a life of my own choosing, one step at a time. My victory wasn't about wealth or revenge, it was about reclaiming myself, about finding peace in a world I'd thought was lost to me forever. The fallout of James's life continued to unfold in the months that followed, a slow-motion collapse I watched from a distance. His empire, built on lies and stolen opportunities, crumbled entirely. The mansion, with its marble floors and crystal chandeliers, was the first to go, seized by the bank in a matter of weeks. His luxury cars, symbols of a success he'd never truly earned, were repossessed, their gleaming surfaces now just memories posted online with captions like, "Success isn't given, it's earned." His company, one my father had helped him secure, let him go when his financial troubles became public, his reputation tarnished by whispers of fraud splashed across legal documents. Emily's departure was the final blow. She'd bet on the wrong man, her loyalty tied to wealth that no longer existed. She filed for divorce, took what little assets remained in her name, and vanished into a new life, leaving James alone in the ruins of his own making, with nothing to offer but regrets. The social circles that once celebrated him, toasting with champagne at his extravagant parties, now mocked him, their laughter echoing in the void he'd created. I heard rumors of his desperate attempts to borrow money, selling off possessions to pay debts, but no one stepped in to help. The mighty had fallen, and the world watched without pity, their interest fading as quickly as his wealth. Part of me wondered if he'd ever accept the consequences of his actions, or if he'd spend his life blaming others, our father, me, anyone but himself. But it didn't matter anymore. His story was no longer mine to carry, and I had no intention of looking back. One morning, an email from James arrived, stark and desperate, its subject line a single word: "Please." I stared at it for a long time before opening it, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. "I've lost everything," it read. "I don't know where to go from here. If you ever cared about me, even a little, please help." I reread the words, searching for some flicker of emotion: anger, sadness, regret. But there was only calm, a quiet certainty that I'd finally let go. I deleted the message without replying, stepped out into the bright morning sun, and felt its warmth on my skin, a gentle embrace. I smiled, knowing I was finally, truly free, unburdened by the past, ready to embrace the future. As I sat at the dining table one evening, sipping a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid catching the light, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. For years I'd lived in the shadow of their betrayal, questioning my own worth, wondering if I'd been too blind, too weak to see it coming. I'd felt like a fool for trusting the people who'd turned on me so easily, for believing in a love and a family that had crumbled. But now I saw the truth. Their failure was theirs alone. They'd destroyed themselves with their greed, their lies, their choices. I'd endured, emerging stronger, wiser, with a life I could call my own, built not on their ruins, but on my own resilience. The house in Oak Ridge, once heavy with memories of loss, became a place of renewal, a canvas for new beginnings. I filled it with new moments, dinners with friends who filled the rooms with laughter, quiet evenings reading by the fire, plans for a future I hadn't dared to dream of before. I traveled, explored, built a business that thrived on my own terms, each success a testament to my strength. The world was open to me and I embraced it, no longer looking over my shoulder, no longer waiting for the past to catch up. I was free, not just from James and Emily, but from the pain they'd caused, from the doubts that had held me back. The final closure came quietly, unexpectedly, like the last note of a song fading into silence. Another message from James, brief and hollow. "Are you happy now?" I stared at the screen, letting the words sink in, their weight settling into the space between us. Happiness wasn't about him anymore, not about his fall or his regrets. It was about the peace I'd found, the life I'd built, the freedom I'd claimed through years of pain and perseverance. I deleted his number, erasing the last tether to a past I no longer needed. As I walked out into the morning light, the sun warm on my face, I felt something I hadn't in years: hope. The future was mine, and I was ready to live it, unburdened, unafraid, and whole. Thank you for listening. Please share your thoughts, like this video if you found it helpful, and subscribe for more.